Some of the most fascinating evidence in South America has recently emerged. Researchers have discovered channels and pathways in the Amazon that could not have been created by any other means than human activity. These include irrigation systems and grid patterns similar to urban layouts. We are taught that the Amazon was sparsely populated by hunter-gatherers until recently, but these discoveries challenge that narrative. A new expedition followed a trail of magnetic anomalies into the jungle and found a sealed chamber. Inside, they found no simple tools. They found the ribs of extinct Ice Age monsters arranged like a cathedral. Carbon dating at the site is impossible according to standard history textbooks. Basically, whoever built this place had advanced engineering skills thousands of years before they should have existed, and they left a message that changes the entire history of humankind. The Invisible City Revealed. The Amazon is roughly the size of the entire continental United States. However, despite all our satellites and modern technology, we have mapped less of the Amazon's interior than we have of the surface of the moon. It is Earth's last great blind spot. For more than a century, explorers have disappeared trying to find lost cities here. The jungle grows so fast it could swallow a stone temple in just a few years. But here's the deal. We no longer need machetes to find ruins. We have something called Lidar. Think of Lidar as sonar for light. An airplane flies over the trees and fires billions of laser pulses at the ground. Most hit the leaves, but some penetrate through cracks and ricochet off the earth. A computer removes the trees from the data, and suddenly you can see the ground as if the forest didn't exist. In 2019, Ella Al-Shamahi led desert, but when the data arrived, the lab fell silent. The screen showed no random rises. It showed lines. Perfectly straight lines that stretched for miles. Nature doesn't make straight lines. The scan revealed roads, elevated platforms, and square plazas. It looked like an urban grid planned beneath the vineyards. But the craziest detail was in the center of the map. Right at the base of a limestone ridge, the laser data showed a perfect oval shape. It wasn't a hole. The density of the rocks was unlike anything around it. It looked like a huge door that had been melted down and sealed shut. Dr. Ella realized that this wasn't just an agreement, it was a fortress. The scale was impressive. The mapped area covered 30 square miles. To sustain such a large city, extensive agriculture, trade, and engineering would have been necessary. According to the mainstream timeline, the people in the Amazon at that time would have been small nomadic tribes. This scan proved that idea wrong. But it gets even stranger. The LiDAR showed that the door to the ridge wasn't covered by soil. It was an exposed rock with a chemical signature suggesting it had been heated to extreme temperatures, as if someone or something had melted the rock to seal it shut. The team knew they couldn't just stand there looking at the screen. They had to go out there. But the jungle reacts. The place was hundreds of kilometers from the nearest road, in an area known for violent storms and brutal terrain. Dr. Ella organized an expedition, believing she would find a lost city. She had no idea that the city was just the appetizer. The real secret awaited within that ridge, and getting there would require walking through a landscape that defied time itself. The journey to the crest revealed the first impossible clue. Walking among the remnants of extinct beasts. The paintings didn't depict jaguars or monkeys. They showed animals that have been extinct for 12,000 years. There were drawings of mastodons, relatives of elephants, that disappeared at the end of the Ice Age. There were giant sloths. And when I say giant sloths, don't think of the small, harmless creatures in the trees today. These animals were the size of a minivan and stood 3.66 meters tall on their hind legs. Their claws were as long as a human forearm. The fact that these animals were painted on the wall meant one thing: the artists had seen them alive. This dated the site to at least 12,600 years ago, thousands of years older than any sophisticated civilization supposedly existed in this region. But it wasn't just a documentary about nature painted on stone. The pigment analysis was a bombshell. The red ochre used in the paint didn't come from the local soil. Their chemical signature matched mineral deposits found more than 400 miles away. Think about that. 12,000 years ago, these people weren't just surviving. They traveled, traded, and transported specific artistic materials across the continent. This level of organization rivals ancient Egypt, but it happened in the heart of the Amazon. Dr. Ella noticed something disturbing in the mural. The animals weren't just standing still, they were running. Each figure was depicted in a state of panic, fleeing in a specific direction. At the center of the chaos was a human figure beneath a strange symbol, a circle with irregular lines radiating outward like a ring of fire in the sky. Beside the figure were dots arranged in a precise pattern. An astronomer on the team realized it wasn't decoration, it was a star map. But the stars weren't in their modern positions. They corresponded exactly to the night sky as it appeared 10,800 years before the Common Era, the end of the Younger Dryas period, a time when Earth underwent a sudden and violent climate change. Temperatures plummeted, then soared. The oceans rose. The mural was a record of that catastrophe. These people weren't just creating art, they were leaving a warning, saying that the world had already ended once before, and that the path led directly to the sealed oval door that the Lidar had detected. The team followed the base of the cliff until they found it. The door was a section of rock smoother than everything around it, covered in a pale mineral glaze known as calcite. It looked like flux stone, but harder. And here's the problem. As they approached the seal, their electronics began to malfunction. Compass needles spun wildly, their direction locked towards the sealed door.
Opening the time capsule. Compass needles spinning wildly usually mean one thing: a large amount of magnetic material or metal nearby. But this was a limestone ridge, and limestone is not magnetic. The team installed scanners to locate a weak point in the calcite wall. Vibration readings suggested that the rock was not solid. There was an empty space behind it, a huge space. Dr. Ella gave the order to drill. They used diamond-tipped drill bits, expecting to break through in an hour. It took 3 days. The mineral seal was incredibly dense, reinforced with something that dulled the tools. Finally, the drill bit broke through, and then something happened that sent shivers down everyone's spine. A hissing sound. Pressurized air escaped from the hole. This sometimes happens in sealed tombs, but this air was different. It didn't smell of rot or decay. It smelled of metal, like ozone and damp iron. It was the smell of a storm trapped in a bottle for millennia. They widened the opening just enough to let it in. Dr. Ella was the first. She fell into the darkness, her flashlight cutting through the dust. The first thing she noticed was the ground. It wasn't rough cave stone, it was paved. Inside an Ice Age sealed cave, there was a smooth, level floor, and it gets even more insane. The floor was made of a carbon-rich black soil known as terra preta, an artificial super soil found in the Amazon. It was designed to be hyper-fertile and never deplete, and scientists still don't fully understand how the ancients made it so perfect. Finding it inside the cave meant it wasn't a natural formation. It was a purpose-built bunker. As the rest of the team descended, the scale of the place became clear. The ceiling arched 30 feet above us. The walls were reinforced with basalt pillars, a dense volcanic rock that had to be transported kilometers away. It was an architectural masterpiece, built to withstand the weight of the mountain itself. They walked deeper along the paved path. The air was heavy, the silence absolute. No bats, No insects, only the sound of boots hitting ancient ground. Then the path opened up to a central chamber. What they saw there made the main discovery seem ordinary. Lined up against the walls were bones, not piled up like in a cemetery, but neatly arranged. Enormous curved ribs, each over 6 feet long, were embedded in the floor in perfect arches, forming a thoracic tunnel. These were the ribs of mastodons, depicted in the exterior mural. The builders used the bones of Ice Age giants as structural elements. It looked like a temple, a sanctuary. The effort required to drag bones weighing several tons into the cave and lift them was impressive. But why? Why build a cathedral of bone inside a sealed mountain? Dr. Ella approached the center of the chamber. There was a circular depression, a pool, filled with a black liquid so still it looked like a mirror. When she shone the light on the reflection looked wrong. The liquid was thick, viscous. It wasn't water, it was something completely different. The echo of the impact. The team cautiously approached the black pool. In the Amazon, stagnant water usually means parasites and disease, but this liquid was sterile. They collected a sample. It was neither oil nor muddy water. Field testing revealed it to be water heavily saturated with metallic isotopes and charcoal. It was almost like a liquid preservative. And it worked. Floating in the dense black liquid were seeds. Not fossilized seeds, but preserved organic material. The team's botanist nearly fainted. They were seeds from plants that became extinct more than 10,000 years ago. There were species of palm trees and medicinal plants that don't exist in the modern Amazon. That changed everything. The cave wasn't a tomb for people, it was an ark. The builders foresaw the impending disaster. The fire in the sky is shown in the mural. They knew the plants outside were going to die, so they built a bunker. They created a sterile environment using the black liquid and the black earth, and they stored the seeds of the world to replant them later. But they never had the chance. The team found pots sealed with wax along the walls. Inside, they found more seeds, dried tubers, and DNA samples from crops grown at that time. This was an apocalyptic vault, exactly like the one we have in Norway today, but built 12,000 years ago. This proves that these ancient peoples understood biology, preservation, and long-term planning on a level we never gave them credit for. They weren't just surviving day after day. They were thinking about the future of their civilization centuries later. But there was one last mystery in the cave: the back wall. It was covered in a thick layer of soot, not from a bonfire, but from a high-intensity explosion. Embedded in the soot were microscopic glass beads called microspheres. These tiny glass beads only form when rock is melted by a cosmic impact or a nuclear explosion. But Dr. Ella realized the truth. The Younger Dryas impact theory suggests that a comet fragment struck Earth about 12,800 years ago, causing massive fires and a sudden frost. Microspheres on the wall proved the theory was real. The shock wave from the impact must have reached here. The heat was so intense that it melted the rock outside, sealing the cave. The people who built this vault didn't mysteriously disappear. They were trapped, or perhaps sealed from the inside to protect the contents, hoping someone in the future would find it. The skeletal structure, the star map, the seed bank, everything was a message. They were trying to save the building blocks of their world. The magnetic anomaly that the team noticed from the outside came from the basalt pillars. They were highly magnetized, likely due to the intense electrical storms that occurred during a cosmic impact event. Everything in the cave was a physical record of the day the world almost ended. The most frightening part was what they found beside the pool. Near the edge of that mysterious black pool, the team stumbled upon something that shouldn't have been there. It was a set of tools. They were elegant, sharp, and black. They were made of obsidian, volcanic glass. Here's the problem. There is no obsidian in the Amazon. Geology doesn't support that. To find volcanic glass like that, you need to travel to the Andes Mountains. This is a journey of thousands of miles through some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. Finding obsidian here is like finding a polar bear in the Sahara Desert. It simply doesn't fit. This confirmed something enormous. This proved that a trade network existed, one that spanned the entire continent. We're not talking about a few people walking along a trail. We're talking about a super trade highway that transported heavy raw materials over impossible distances. But how did they move it? This leads us to the first crazy theory. Some fringe researchers analyze the size of these obsidian blocks and the absence of wheel tracks and suggest something radical. They talk about acoustic levitation. There are legends throughout the Andes region about priests who could use sound, specific frequencies from trumpets or chants, to levitate heavy stones. We know that sound waves can levitate tiny droplets of water in laboratories today. Did these ancient peoples discover how to amplify this technology? Did they hum these tools across the mountains? It sounds crazy, but looking at the pristine condition of the tools, you start to wonder. But the tools themselves weren't the most astonishing part. It was how they were found. They were arranged neatly, perfectly parallel. A chisel here, a hammerstone there. It looked exactly like a workshop where the employee had just left for their lunch break. You expected them to return at any moment. But no one came back in. There were no bodies in the cave. We scanned the floor, checked the corners, searched for burial pits. Nothing.
This is the part that keeps the experts up at night. If this cave was a bunker designed to survive an apocalypse, where are the people? If they died here, where are their bones? If they left, why did they leave their most valuable tools behind, so carefully arranged? Dr. Alla has a theory, but it's a weighty one. She believes the cave wasn't meant for them, it was for us. But others go further. They analyze the lack of bodies and the electromagnetic anomalies in the walls and propose the phase shift theory. What if they hadn't died? What if they hadn't left on foot? Quantum physicists tell us that other dimensions exist right above our own. Some theorists believe that this high-tech culture discovered a way to vibrate their physical bodies at a higher frequency. When the cataclysm came, when the sky turned to fire and the floods arrived, they didn't flee. They simply transformed. They drifted into a parallel reality, leaving their physical tools behind because they no longer needed matter. It sounds like science fiction, but we have legends of star people or sky gods disappearing in a flash in almost every ancient culture. Perhaps they didn't go to the stars. Perhaps they're still here, just invisible to our eyes. Let's return to Earth for a moment, or at least geologically. Dr. Ella believes they knew they couldn't physically survive the approaching cataclysm. The climate was changing too fast. The Younger Dryas impact event was cooling the planet overnight. The megafauna, their primary food source, were dying in mass extinctions. They saw what was coming. They knew their time was up. So they dedicated their final efforts to one goal: preserving the source code of their civilization. They sealed the cave. They placed the seeds and DNA records of the animals safely inside the earth. They protected it with magnetic rock to deflect radiation and a chemical pool to stabilize the temperature. Then they sealed the door. What happened to them afterward is a mystery. Perhaps they went out into the freezing cold and perished. Perhaps they went to the inner earth. This is another crazy theory gaining traction. Many indigenous tribes in the Amazon speak of the ant people, or the inner people, who live in vast, deep underground cave systems. Did this civilization retreat deeper into the crust, using geothermal energy to survive the ice age on the surface? If Lidar is correct, and there are tunnels connecting these locations for hundreds of miles, it's possible they didn't build a bunker. They built a gateway to an underground world that we haven't even mapped yet. Whatever happened to them, this discovery forces us to rewrite the textbooks. We have to tear out the first chapter of human history and start over. We used to think that civilization began in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, about 6,000 years ago. We were told that before that, we were just hunter-gatherers banging stones together.
But this site in the Amazon proves that highly complex societies existed thousands of years before Sumeria or Babylon. They had geology. They understood chemistry well enough to create this preservation reserve. They had agriculture that made ours seem primitive, and they had astronomy that could predict cosmic cycles. They faced a threat to which we are still vulnerable today, a sudden and violent change in the planet's climate. This brings us to the mother culture theory. For years, people have whispered about Atlantis, not as a magical underwater city with mermaids, but as a true global maritime civilization that existed during the Ice Age. Could the Amazon be a colony of that lost empire? The symbols on the obsidian tools correspond to symbols found in Turkey at Göbekli Tepe. They correspond to symbols found in Indonesia. How would this be possible if there wasn't a global culture connected by ships or flight? Yes, flight. Among the artifacts, there are small golden objects that suspiciously resemble airplanes, aerodynamic wings, vertical stabilizers. Archaeologists call them zoomorphic insects, but if you put one in a wind tunnel, it generates lift. If these people had an escape route, then the lost city wasn't just a city of gold. It was a hub of a global network. It was a city of knowledge. The real treasure wasn't jewels. It was proof that humanity has risen and fallen more times than we imagine. So you think there are more apocalyptic vaults hidden in the Amazon? Or was this an isolated accident in history? It makes you wonder how much we really know about our past. Leave your opinions in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what we discover next. Thanks for watching.